Hello, I'm John Mountjoy with the Kentucky Head Start Association, and I'd like to welcome you to a new series of conversations that we're putting together for the benefit of Head Start professionals across Kentucky. This is an experiment, if you will. This is our very first one we're doing, and I'm very pleased to do it with our good friend, Jay McCord. Many of you know Jay. Jay has been a part of Head Start trainings across Kentucky for many years, but he most recently has been a part of KHSA's live virtual event. And Jay is an expert on the multi-generational workplace. And so we had a great conversation during the conference, and we thought, we really need to follow that up and discuss some additional ideas, provide more insights into things that we think the Head Start community needs to know about these issues. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jay. And Jay, if you could just sort of tell us a little bit about the multi-generational workplace.
Yeah, well, John, first off, I love being with you all, and you personally, but all the folks from Kentucky Head Start. What a challenging job you have. And then we throw COVID on top of that. Oh my gosh, how in the world do you do what you know how to do so well live and in person and have done for so long, and then translate that into a season like we're in? So this conversation is really designed to encourage you at an individual level as well as the collective level. So thank you for having me. John, the before COVID hit, what people had to realize was that you had 4 and sometimes 5 separate generations potentially working side by side. And that just causes all kinds of challenges because guess what? Different generations see things differently. And they define maybe even the same word separately. Think about this one for a second. John, if I was to say the words simple technology, imagine how 5 separate generations define those 2 little words, simple technology. So the bottom line to it is that this was a problem before. This was a headwater issue before. And so many of the challenges that you're facing as a professional in this area, they roll up to multiple generations working side by side, clashing, wanting it their own way. And so that's why I love doing what I do, is help untangle that knot a little bit, answer questions specific to it. So at a 30,000 foot, John, there's 4 and sometimes 5 separate generations. You've got traditionals, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and now Gen Z, all potentially working together, or at least you, as a Head Start person, you may have Gen Z in your as the person you're taking care of every day that you're interfacing with as your student, who has one of those generations as parents or grandparents or other teachers or aunts and uncles. And so it's really important that you understand this and know how to communicate across those lines. So that's the 30,000 foot view, and why this is so important, because it didn't go away with COVID. It only intensified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of interesting that you mentioned that, because I think when we talk about the multi-generational workplace, we're only thinking about those we work with.
Yeah.
And we're sometimes not thinking about those that we serve. So that is really something that I think folks have to pay a lot of attention to.
And that's the piece. So let me step you out of your all's world of Head Start. And let's just say that you had a business, that you ran a business and you employed, I don't know, let's say 20 people that were all different generations. Most people ask me to come in and speak to, well, how in the world do we get along with all these different employees and so forth? And they never realize that they've got customers or clients, people that they serve, that are of all these different generations as well. And what is fascinating, this is what I want everybody watching this to realize, is everything you're feeling, everything that you're struggling with, especially as it relates to multi-generations, every single person you're bumping into is facing that. So if you've got a child in your program, what you have to realize is that their parents, their grandparents, aunts and uncles, people that they care about, may work at a place that's dealing with some of this frustration, maybe dealing with it themselves, right, in other ways. So when you're sensitized to that, you can just serve your constituency a lot better, and you're just a lot more empathetic, instead of just being frustrated by it.
Yeah. So, obviously, Jay, this is an area that you have spent a great deal of your career focused on, learning about, teaching about. In fact, you've got a regular podcast that you do, Relevant Leadership, how to leverage generations. So, I'm glad that we can make this pivot from sort of that general perspective into something that's a little bit more specific for Head Start. So I know one of the things that you like to say is it's about knowing the times and knowing what to do.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what that means as sort of our jumping off point?
Yes. So if you think about that phrase, knowing the times, knowing what to do, it's such a great phrase because that's what we all should be. We should be, and we would love people to look at us as, you know what, you're somebody that knows the times and you know what to do. Break that statement down. It means that you really understand what's going on out there or in here within your workplace. It also means that you have solutions when you know what to do. So you not just know about what's going on from, let's say, headlines and things like that. You're not just aware, but you actually have solves for people. And when you have solves for people, what's interesting is that you become highly relevant to them. I mean, if you know how to solve some of my biggest problems, I want you, come here, sit down, John, sit down at my table, tell me how to fix this, right? And so here's what's interesting. We say it's about relationships all the time. It's about relationships. And we know that to be true. But one of the interesting things is you have to be relevant to have a relationship. Mm-hmm. So part of our relationships, yours and mine, over the years has been that this content that I talk about and we bump into on with each other on, you love it because, man, that's hit me where I live. I love working with Jay because of that. And so our relationship is formed through that relevance, right? So what I would challenge you, Head Start folks that are watching, is you want to recognize what's going on out there. Don't just be frustrated with the headlines, but really look at what's being said, what's happening. And that's what this conversation is really all about, is to help you be able to go back into your workplace and have conversations at a higher level. Be seen as someone that knows the times and knows what to do. And so here's the deal. It can seem really confusing. I know, John, like I'm trying to keep up with all this stuff, right? All these different things. What's the times? Let me make it super simple for you so that you can go in and be the most relevant person wherever you work. The times really boil down to two numbers, the number 8 and the number 5. If you know 8 and 5, you know the times. What do they mean? Just real quickly. 8 is the 8 seconds. That's the average attention span of someone today. Now, that was true before COVID, but I'm telling you, John, it's dropped. And I guarantee you, you're watching this right now going, mine's like on half a second, right? So what's super important for you to understand today is that you have to be more precise and concise in how you communicate. And really what the deal is, you've got to focus your efforts on who's in front of you. Meaning, what is it that John Mountjoy really needs from Jay McCord in this conversation that we're getting ready to have, this interview, this confrontation, this presentation? So when you go to present, you go to speak, you go to interview, you go to talk to somebody, I want to challenge you to really think about who's in front of me and what do they value, right? And what is it and how can I show them within the first 8 seconds that I understand them, right? Mm-hmm. That's really critical. Most people don't give any thought to that. They show up and throw up, right? They just start talking. This is what
they just start going.
Yeah. And so here's something, John, that you and I have not even talked about, because this literally hit me about 4 or 5 days ago. But do you know what the number one thing you're actually guarding right now in your life, your number one asset is? This is a surprise question. You didn't know this one was coming.
No, number one, let me guess. Time?
Okay. So you think it's time, and that's what we all say, but it's a shade off of that. You're actually guarding your bandwidth. Now, let me explain that in just a second. You may have time to meet with Jay McCord today, but you might not have the brain space to think about a new, hey, what if we created a conversations podcast and we could do this and that, right? So what's interesting is, and again, this is just something recent for me since we've talked, since the Head Start annual meeting. I want everybody to understand what you're guarding and what everyone else is guarding, whether you know it or not, is bandwidth. That's what's so important to you. So what I would challenge you to do, what we're finding to be really helpful is if you think about the person on the other end of your conversation first and realize they don't have a lot of bandwidth, when you communicate to them, let them understand, here's the whole situation. Here's everything you need to know about our meeting. Here's how long it's going to be. Here's what we're going to cover. Here's what the next step is going to be. If you tell me those things, I'm good. Now I understand what the meeting's about. But if I just walk into a meeting cold, I don't know what we're going to talk about. How long is this going to go? What do you want me to do? That's super important. So what's the meeting about? How long will it be? And what's a logical next step from the meeting? If you'll tell me that in advance, you're really helping me, giving me something I value. And the other piece of the equation is that that bandwidth piece is so important. That 8 seconds, just think about that. It's still the times, but it's that bandwidth piece. Bring people something of value, recognize they don't even understand they're guarding this bandwidth. And you are guarding that as well. So give them one decision to make at a time. That's super critical, John, that I think folks, especially in the Head Start program, you're juggling all this stuff, right?
Right.
Be careful that on your end, that you're only asking someone to do one thing. I need you to say yes or no to this. Can we meet about that? You know, click on this button and it will lead you to something else, but do one thing at a time. The big mistake folks are making is they're putting too much information into their emails, into their into a meeting, into a webinar. Break it down. And I guess we're living testament to this. Today's the living testament, because I could have tried to cram jam all of this into that annual meeting, 60 minutes, just
that's right.
Full, right? But we decided to go a different route of, let's say at high level, and then let's drop down over a course of conversations. So I got a little distracted, but 8 is one aspect of our times. Recognizing bandwidth is something we're guarding. People don't have they've got very short attention spans. But the 5 is the 5 separate generations that are all seeing things different. Okay. So if you know those 2 things, then you really know the times. And what's great is now you can sit down and start thinking about, well, what are some solutions? What are some ways to navigate short attention spans? And maybe we've got some different generations seeing it different.
Well, let me go back for just a second. So if we think about this concept of bandwidth, so, my response was time and your response was, well, yeah, sort of, but capacity. It kind of strikes me that maybe it's it's this interesting combination of one's capacity to handle something and one has time to do it. We all have full plates, right? So, but I really like that concept of you as the person needing something.
Yes.
You as the person wanting something, being cognizant of how to communicate that to the other person and recognizing the position that they're in. I mean, we're starting to broach into an area of emotional intelligence when we're looking at other people and having a conversation like that and sort of knowing where they're coming from. So, yeah, I think we're going to have to do another segment on that, Jay.
Well, and that's totally fine. John, back in the day, back in the 90s, when Stephen Covey wrote his famous book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I always remember number 4 habit was seek to understand before being understood. And that's really probably the easiest way to say this is really seek to understand where that person's living, what's going on with them, so that when you communicate, they see the value of what you're talking about to them. And that's where we are missing it right now, because we're all so full bandwidth wise that we're just like, look, this is what I need. Here it is.
Right.
The big mistake that I'm seeing across every industry, whether it's business, government, education, nonprofit world, doesn't matter. Most people are trying to put too much into one thing, one conversation, one email, one podcast. So I would tell you to pace yourself. And the great North Star of this thing is give me one decision to make. Tell me, okay, click here. Then you can have another decision after that, but just one at a time, please. Yeah. Okay. So awesome. 8 and 5 are the times. And let me just, so that you've got a point of reference, the 5 generations, don't ever get hung up on dates, because you'll go on the internet and see 4 different, let's say, articles about different generations. They'll give you just slightly off on each one. But let me give you a couple dates just as a general concept. But recognize that generations are just clues, meaning nothing is hard and fast, but there's a lot of clues within a generation of how they're going to respond, how they're going to act. But traditionals our oldest generation. They were born before 1946. They're a declining generation, but they're still a part of daily life. They still are impacting us in lots of different ways. Number two is boomers. Boomers were born roughly between 1946 and 1966. Largest generation of Americans ever, but now they are diminishing, not only in the workplace, but mortality rates. And so actually millennials are larger than them, both on the planet as well as in the workplace. So you have traditionals, boomers, Gen X, my generation, those of us born between 1966, 1981. And we're the middle child generation, totally treated like a middle child. It's crazy. I saw a report the other day, John, on CBS that said, they listed the generation that said traditionals, boomers, millennials, post-millennial. I'm like, nothing happened between 1966 and 1981. Nothing, right? So you have Gen X, then millennials, those born between 81 and 2000, now the largest generation. Millennials make up 55% of the workforce right now, but soon will be 70% of the global workforce. And then lastly is Gen Z. And Gen Z is squishy, okay? Because it's really hard to figure out when millennials actually stopped and Gen Z started. You'll probably, if you go to the internet, you'll see that Gen Z starts in 1996. And then some will say in 2001. Here's what's safe. Gen Z is in school right now, K through 12, probably into college. Some would say just getting out of college. But Gen Z is in school right now. And they're who are in the Head Start program. They're the kids of that. So that's the generations just in the macro, and then kind of defined where they fit.
Right. So, and we're going to go into each one of these generations more deeply in subsequent podcasts. Yes. But, one of the questions I have for you is, can you just give us sort of that 30,000 foot view of, are there specific generational trends that are impacting daily lives for everybody, whether it's your personal life or professional life, or how are they coming together?
Yeah. So here's the big concept. If you know this, you really do know the times generationally. It's called the compression of the two number 10s. And what I want you to do is, as you're watching this, if you've got the ability to just write this down or draw it, take a piece of paper and draw a number 10 on one side and number 10 on the other. And what I want you to do underneath is you're going to define what these 10s are, but you need to know that every single day they're getting closer and closer together. And that's actually the pressure you're feeling in the workplace. Nobody's ever really said, that's what you're feeling. Here's where it's coming from, but we're getting ready to define it right now. Two number 10s. The first number 10 on this side of the ledger are that 10,000 baby boomers, those born between 46 and 66, are going to retire today. And 10,000 will retire tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that's going to happen for the next 18 years. So 10,000 boomers that have been in leadership roles, have had titles, have had influence, are going to retire. Some voluntarily, and some are going to be voluntold to retire. But the bottom line is that they're going to step away from the workplace in the capacity they were in before. And so that puts a lot of pressure on you in interesting ways. If you think about your cell phone right now and who's in the cell phone, and you think about your best contacts, John, the ones that really can give you the donation, they can give you the front row tickets, they got the influence. It's the legislator that you can call, or the school board official that you can call and just make something happen. Ask yourself, how old are they? See, if they're in that baby boomer generation, then sometime in the next 18 years, they're going to retire and their influence goes away, which means your influence goes away if you do not know their successor. If you haven't understood some of this these generational dynamics. So 10,000 boomers retiring every day is going to put pressure on you individually, but also it's going to put pressure on you in a institutional way. And what I mean by that simply is that there are certain things as baby boomers move through the system that are going to have to change dramatically to accommodate them. And I was with the Kentucky State demographer a few years ago, and I tell this story all the time. And he talks about, when you get over the age of 70, some parts need to be replaced, hips, knees, things like that. And when boomers get over the wall of 70, which they have, it's going to put pressure on places that we don't think about. Now, prior to COVID, he would always talk about airports because we all have the wonderful experience of racing across an airport trying to catch a ridiculous connection. And if you got bad hips and knees, that isn't going to happen. COVID has removed that as an example of, this is happening every day. But I would say the example that's happening every day is technology. What is the technology that your folks are comfortable with, can use, those types of things. And as boomers age, there's going to be change in the type of technology that's used. So my point to you watching today is baby boomers retiring 10,000 a day impacts you personally and your school, your organization, your community. So it's really important you understand that. But on the other side, the other 10 that's pushing against you is that we're in a 10-year window where millennials have moved into that role of the largest generation on the planet, largest generation in the workplace. So every day they move into decision-making roles. So your school board, for example, may be radically shifting over the next few years from boomer-led to millennial-led with some Gen X sprinkled in the middle. So you've really got to understand those dynamics and what makes them tick. And as you said, John, we'll dive more into that at another day or at another conversation. But for today, recognize that because of those two things, every day they get closer together and it puts pressure on you and me and your organization. And if you know how to navigate that, well, you're the most relevant player in the room. If you know how to lead that conversation, which is what I'm actually going to challenge you to do after this is over with, is to lead that conversation at work, in your community, in your house. Your status is elevated. You're a much more strategic thinker than just a tactical thinker. And I don't care what your title is or how long you've been doing whatever you've been doing, how low or small that is on a totem pole. You talk about these things, you're really talking about the times.
Yeah, so we've downloaded an awful lot of information over a brief period of time with folks. And we are going to be doing some subsequent conversations, but what would you say today is sort of an immediate thing that someone could take away from this conversation? What are the things that they need in order to be relevant?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, recognize it's 8 and 5. Don't overcomplicate it. It's 8 and 5. Either it's short bandwidths, no attention spans. You got to communicate more effectively in a smaller space, and understanding that when you communicate, it might be heard very differently depending upon the age of your audience. Also, the other takeaway is the compression of the 2/10 is happening. It's putting pressure on you. And I would challenge you after this is over with to sit down and just ask yourself personally, what does 10,000 boomers retiring every day, what's good and bad for me in that? And what does it mean that millennials are moving up into decision-making roles? What's good and bad for me? Jot it down on that piece of paper I ask you to write on. And what's interesting is you'll start to see, you know what? I don't have to just be frustrated with all this. I could actually see opportunities with this. And we can talk more, John, at a later date about actually drilling into what might those opportunities really be. But the point simply is, I want everybody watching today to be encouraged that this is going on, but you don't have to feel overwhelmed by it. When you can get on top of it and see it's really 8 and 5. Yeah, people have short bandwidths. I've got to be more intentional about my communication. And I got to really think about my audience, because it might be a completely different audience and they may not be hearing it the way I think. Once we become better communicators and be seen as higher thinkers, then we're the most relevant players in the room. And that's where it gets exciting, regardless of our careers.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, Jay, thank you very much for spending the time with us this morning. I know that this is something that you hold very dear and are passionate about. And I think that through that passion, we're beginning to educate folks about the fact that these really are things that you need to think about, you need to talk about, you need to discuss, and you really have to figure out, how can I be better in the workplace? How can I be better at customer service? It's interesting in the Head Start community, we have that very problem of folks that are getting older and retiring, and other folks that are moving up, and are they ready? You've then got the other challenge dealing with your customers. What we see is you have more grandparents that are raising children.
Yes.
And so if we have young staff in a Head Start program that are having to deal with or work with folks that are older out there, that's something that they just have to pay attention to. So anyway, I want to thank you
Yeah.
so much, and I want to make sure that we've got you back and doing some next sessions. So
Okay.
we're going to be talking about each of these generations over subsequent conversations. But it's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Anytime you ask me to come, John, I'm coming. Again, I wish everybody well out there. Yes, it is a tough season, but for those that know the times and know what to do, it is the season of opportunity, and I hope that's what happens from these conversations. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jay.